The Book of Five Rings, the Book of Fire. The Book of Fire describes the importance of knowing the difference between using a bamboo practice sword and a real sword in combat. Although technique is extremely important and must never be overlooked, there is a tendency among most would-be warriors to concentrate only on the development of their craft through skills developed with certain moves. Would-be warriors who use only the raiment of their profession and brag through their motions do not understand strategy. They overlook the all-important aspect of spirit, thinking that it will come to them without additional work. To release the spirit, one must accentuate the work with meditations of the heart and of the soul. Not doing so is the same as performing music note for note, with no emphasis on the feeling of the particular piece being performed. And so, most warriors only perform tricks. The way of the warrior is filled with soul and feeling. Without it, the warrior is essentially dead, even though he may appear to be very strong. The only way you can understand the truth about killing an enemy in combat is by killing an enemy in combat. Because this may be difficult to do whenever you want to, proper practice is essential. Only by studying actual tactics and being able to determine an enemy's strength can you actually understand the meaning of life and death in war. You must train constantly with the attitude of killing the enemy. When this attitude is fully developed, potential enemies will not wish to enter into combat with a warrior they sense has the resolve and conviction of one with no concern for the enemy's well-being. In general, they cannot know the truth. It is foolish to get into scuffles with an enemy and not attack with a killing resolve. In order to understand life and death, you must actually be in a situation where the possibility of death exists. There is a constant need to study one's weaponry and the methods to be used when real combat occurs. Regardless of this, you must strive for perfection of your soul by thinking in terms of actually killing enemies when you are practicing. Through constant application of your training skills, you will come to understand the value of a particular technique if you practice with full resolve and use the methods of visualization in your training. You should practice wearing your full suit of armor in order to learn the true feeling of combat. You can become a master of strategy through thorough and constant practice. By seeing into a particular technique, you will learn where and when it can be used best, even though you are not using it for a real purpose at the time. Training enables you to see deeply into the motivations for your warriorness, as well as into the development of your abilities. In this way, you learn your craft. Anyone who truly wishes to master strategy can master strategy. Through constant practice, you become free from your own ideas of what and how things should work. When you learn a technique and apply your soul to it, you will find that the technique will reveal to you the manner in which it must be used to your personal advantage. This applies to combat without weapons as well. In your everyday dealings with men, you will find a special ability that enables you to control situations and maintain your own position without having to submit yourself to the whims of another. However, it should be pointed out that you yourself must have the courage of your convictions and the courage to act on your convictions. Without this courage and the ability to act, you will become another man's pawn and can easily be defeated. This is the only way to learn my principles of strategy. Through constant training, you will eventually be seen as a man of incredible spiritual power. The place from which you fight. Use everything to your advantage at all times. In outdoor fights, try to keep the sun behind you. In that way, you maintain an advantage by diminishing the opponent's capacities for sight and perception. When fighting indoors, keep a door or avenue of escape behind you. Sometimes you will be overwhelmed and must have an escape route. Always be in a position where you can look down upon the enemy. In real unarmed situations, you may keep any area free to allow you the possibility of escape if necessary. There's nothing wrong with escaping from combat if you are overpowered and honestly cannot win the fight. Get out and make sure you have provided a means to get out. Seek out the place of advantage wherever you enter into a new area. The same applies to seating arrangements around a table. Always seek to occupy the seat with the most advantage. He who has the proper position controls the situation. If it is unavailable to you, then get as close to it as you can, either on the left or right, depending upon how your perceptions direct you. Whether fighting an enemy armed or unarmed, Keep him on the defensive. Chase the enemy around with your body and your spirit. This is excellent strategy. You can easily open targets for yourself with a little effort. But then you must have the courage to go in and kill the enemy without delay. You must be totally resolved when you are fighting. Otherwise you will easily lose. By constantly creating difficulties for the enemy, you will force him to deal with more than one thing, giving you the advantage in killing him swiftly. When you have the enemy in an awkward position, do not let him regain his composure and possibly defeat you. When the enemy is confused, you must go in for the kill. This strategy must be constantly studied. 3 strategies to control the enemy. The best way is to commence with your attack, and in this way, keep him off balance and on the defense. The second way is to step back from his attack and draw him to you. The third way is when you both attack together to be stronger in spirit. There's nothing else. Besides these 3 methods, you either take the lead, hold him off and then take the lead, or force the lead at any given time. This is truly the essence of fighting. Utter resolve is necessary when you are fighting an enemy. In order to beat him, you must control the situation, regardless of the method you use. If you do not control the enemy will control you. The first control of the enemy. By keeping pressure on the enemy, you will keep him constantly in a defensive posture. It is essential that you remain calm when initiating an attack. Your basic attitude should be of wanting to overwhelm and unsettle his spirit. This will permit you to control the situation and make good your attack, the purpose of which is to destroy the enemy. You may appear strong and then deliver your cut through guile. It does not matter how you do it as long as you understand why you are doing it. Change your rhythm and change your timing if necessary. You may appear unresolved, but when you approach the enemy, you must charge in with utter calm and purpose. You may wish to send the enemy a message implying your superior strength. When the enemy realizes his position, quickly go in for the kill. There are times when, although you are prepared to go right through the enemy, you lay back momentarily, and then, without warning, leap in and through. The second control of the enemy. Do not let the enemy overwhelm you with his apparent strength and technique. You must remain calm at all times. In this way, you can control the attack. When the attack comes, be sure to misdirect the aim of the enemy. As an example, feint left and strike from the right. The other way is to sense the attack, and at the very moment of movement, charge in with greater strength, power, and resolve. The third control of the enemy. Never be overwhelmed by the enemy. You can ensure this by keeping your spirit tall and your resolve strong. Regardless of how the enemy approaches, your main thought should be to cut him down. Should the enemy attack strongly and calmly, you must become one with the attack, and through superior resolve, cut him down swiftly. Without constant practice, it is hard for words to convey the true meaning of the thought. To come to understand something that appears obvious, you must constantly probe into the meaning of the words. You must unceasingly practice the techniques. When you think you understand something, you have made only the first approach to it. To further clarify your understanding, you must read and read again. Each time you read and practice a thing, the spirit of the thing itself will reveal more of itself to you. Study is a lifelong undertaking. That is why it is said that the warrior first understands being a warrior when he no longer concerns it. That is why it is said the warrior first understands being a warrior when he no longer concerns himself with being a warrior. The main thing to understand is that you must have no hesitation in killing the enemy. To suffocate the enemy with a pillow. What is meant by suffocating the enemy with a pillow is never permitting him to gain an advantage over you in any way. You can be sure the enemy is thinking likewise. Either you lead the enemy, or he will lead you. You must come to understand the value in this concept. You must also understand that the reason an enemy is fighting you is because an enemy thinks he will defeat you. You must react instantly to an enemy's attack. This can only be accomplished after thorough and diligent practice. If you understand this principle, then you will be able to sense an impending attack and react properly by killing the enemy before he kills you. The main thrust of my entire teaching is training and contemplation on the way of the warrior. It is the only thing that should be in your life. It may appear that there is no room for anything else, but the reverse is true. When you are committed to a particular thing, everything else falls into place because you are not permitting yourself to be sidetracked by another's whims. The strength of your courage to act on your convictions is most important in this regard. It is very hard to devote your life to something and not have anything else appear that provides you with the simple pleasures of life. On the other hand, if you pursue your perfection through a particular way, then that will give you the pleasure of the spirit of the thing itself. These things are hard to understand when only written in words. You must follow through with hard study, hard practice, and immense belief in your own ideal. You have chosen to be a warrior for your own reasons. Regardless of the way you have chosen, if you truly believe in the principles of what you are doing, you will be able to attain perfection. It does not come up overnight. When you understand this, you will be a master of strategy. Crossing the ravine. Having the courage to enter into combat when the time and place are right is what I mean by crossing the ravine. It is essential to have the courage of your convictions and the courage to act upon them. This is the strategy of crossing the ravine. If you are always aware of your surroundings, then you will always be able to cross at the correct time. However, men are not perfect in any aspect of their lives, no matter the amount of time, effort, and energy they put into their search for perfection. The virtue of perfection is that it is always just beyond a man's reach. This is good. If perfection were attainable, then it would have no value. There would be no reason to pursue it. In this light, always know the strengths and weaknesses of yourself and your enemy. Always be aware of the easiest way to accomplish something. Do not strive to do something difficult because you seek favor in the eyes of others. Knowing the right time. How do you feel about going into combat? Is your spirit correct at all times? Are you feeling strong? Do you feel slightly uneasy? It is important that you understand yourself with regard to the possibility of fighting. Another consideration is that the enemy has these thoughts as well. The better you know the opponent, the better equipped you are for battle. The skill you need to win a battle lies in knowing the enemy's strengths and weaknesses. You achieve this through constantly practicing with the attitude of destroying the enemy, knowing where you are at all times, and understanding your relationship to the battle. Knowing the time means that you can instantly assess a situation and act accordingly. When you have acquired the correct attitude, you will be able to easily beat the enemy because you will be truly prepared to go into combat with an understanding of all the skills and abilities that you and your opponent possess. To step on the enemy's sword. It is difficult to attack the enemy if you are busy preparing your weapons for combat. You must come to understand the importance of attacking while the enemy is attacking, and in doing so, step on his sword, making him lose his balance and advantage. You must go directly into the attack and beat the enemy before the enemy has the chance to realize what is happening. This is the classic strategy of misdirection. Would you not want the enemy to stop and think about what he was doing when he starts to attack? Of course you would. And therefore, it is foolish not to think that the reverse is true. As soon as you sense the possibility of an attack, you must react immediately with your own attack to kill the enemy, or you will give him the chance to regather himself and come at you again. You absolutely must commit yourself to overwhelming the enemy by instantly retaliating against him. While the enemy is attempting to attack you, you have the attitude of stepping on him, you can belittle the enemy when you see his strengths and weaknesses. You must step on him with your body and your spirit, and continue to win the fight by killing him. Collapsing the enemy's spirit. Depending upon the amount of conviction you have in regard to the enemy, you can easily get him to collapse under the pressure of your attack. You do this by forcing him to make unnecessary moves, thereby throwing off his timing and rhythm. Once you have made it necessary for the enemy to regather himself, he is at his most vulnerable. It is at this moment that you must immediately go for the kill, with nothing else on your mind except destroying the enemy. Go after the enemy with a resolute spirit. You must stay after the enemy, or he will have a chance to reposition himself, possibly making an even stronger second attack. When you go for the kill, go for the kill. Do not relinquish your position through any weakness on your part. To do so is deadly and will cost you the battle. Becoming the enemy. Denigrate the enemy constantly with great spirit. Do not acknowledge the possibility that the enemy is stronger than you are. Do not accept the possibility that the enemy is smarter than you are in any way whatsoever. If you are aware of the way of the warrior, you are aware of the way of the warrior. The way of the warrior does not permit you to accept an inferior position to anything. You either are the best or you are not the best. If you are, then you will win. If you are not, then you will lose. There's nothing to argue about here. You must also remember your level of understanding. This falls into the area of knowing yourself as well as knowing the enemy. To become the enemy, see yourself as the enemy of your enemy. If you understand strategy, you will know how to beat the enemy. Think this over until it is clear in your mind. To release the grip of four hands. When you and the enemy are of equal spirit and skill, and neither of you can get the other to move, there is a standoff. This can result in deadly consequences. It is called the grip of four hands. It is foolish to stand there toe-to-toe and not be able to get the job done, which is to kill the enemy. If an impasse occurs, sneak something else into combat and win decisively. Combat must never be a thing of pride or stubbornness. If you must change your method of attack, do so without hesitation. Change your timing, change your rhythm, change your approach. It does not matter who is stronger or who is faster. What matters is that you attain your goal. The way of the warrior is to slay the enemy by cutting him down without delay. You must have utter resolve in order to do this, and you must constantly sharpen your skills. Eventually, you will understand the way to do things effectively and efficiently, without stress or strain. Mislead the enemy, and then slay him with an unorthodox technique. To move as a shadow. Sometimes, you cannot go straight into the enemy, and it is necessary to feint just prior to attacking strongly. If the enemy is very strong, he may not show his spirit. Because of this, it is essential that you make a misdirecting motion to open up the enemy, forcing him to show you his strengths and weaknesses. You must constantly be aware of your surroundings and be able to capitalize on them. If you make an opening, then you absolutely must go for it, or it is a waste of the spirit of the thing. If you practice otherwise, after a while, you will be unable to take advantage of the enemy's weakness and become ineffective as a warrior. You will certainly lose the way. Study this carefully. To suffocate a shadow. What is meant by suffocating a shadow is to understand the enemy's strengths and easily see through his intentions. If you can see what the enemy is planning, then how can you fail to defeat him instantly? Only by failing to take advantage of the situation can you, in turn, be defeated. You must train constantly to understand the reasoning behind this strategy. There is nothing mystical in this strategy. If you show the enemy that you know what he is planning, he can be forced to change his attitude to one that is favorable to you. When you see his change in attitude, immediately thrust in with a killing strike. Beat his timing with your timing. Beat his approach with your approach. Control the situation at all times by being aware of your surroundings. When you study the way, it will come to you that everything I am speaking of is practical and functional. Problems occur when you do not understand the true way of the warrior and fail to act upon opportunity. To impress your attitude. Attitudes are contagious. To impress your attitude on the enemy is to force him to think in terms that are to your advantage. When you understand your own abilities, you are able to pass them along to others in the same way a teacher can pass along correct and incorrect ideas and teachings. If you show the enemy that you are agitated, then he may become calmer and at that instant attack with utter resolve and conviction that will kill you. You must have success in your heart and mind in order to know whether information is true or false. If you cannot do this, then you must take the time to study further if you are so inclined. Do not be impressed by the enemy's attitude. Remain calm, even if he starts to attack. If you do not follow yourself, then you will certainly follow someone else. The whole idea of warfare is to beat the enemy. The strength and courage of your convictions is what will carry you through every time, regardless of the situation. You must understand this. Without hard study, how can you ever hope to acknowledge yourself as your own supreme master? This comes with long practice, study, and devotion to the art. The spirit of the thing itself will reveal this to you. When you have imparted your attitudes to someone else, that person effectively becomes your follower. This is the way of the warrior. When you do not discern the reality of the truth, then you become foolish. Do not rush yourself in your learning, and do not expect to know what the master understands. In the case of an enemy, it is important that you control that person or you could be beaten in battle. Forcing loss of balance. A warrior can lose his balance because of danger, surprise, or difficulty. When you attack, you should do so with no warning of any kind. Once your enemy loses his balance, your attack will virtually be impossible to stop. If you stand strong and rigid, your spirit will be very easy to read, and you will be beaten because you are not flexible. The same is true of being too loose. Flexibility is a very important attitude. Things will not always go your way, regardless of your practice and your attempts to define your own existence. Therefore, how can you always maintain strictly one posture? In large-scale combat, attack where the enemy is not expecting you to. Likewise, in one-to-one combat, appear to be one thing and then attack as another. Never give the enemy a chance to see your true spirit. It is easy to lead a horse when you know how to hold the reins. When your enemies are deceived, you will be able to control any situation because they are expecting one thing and you strike at them with another. It is the same with feigning a punch and throwing a kick. Scaring the enemy. The difference between a half-hearted scream, intended to scare the enemy off, and a resolute shout is the difference between bragging and making a commitment to attack with the intent to kill. If you constantly scream, then you will be perceived as a screamer and not a doer. However, if you maintain a strong and powerful presence, and then commit yourself to the attack with a forceful shout, you will scare the enemy and win easily. You win with resolute power, and not false appearances. When you have scared the enemy and his rhythm is confused, you can easily go in for the kill. Use your voice, your body, and your sword to scare him. To frighten the enemy means to make him lose his balance, providing you with an opening into his defenses, where he is easily slain if you have the mind to kill him. To flood in. If the fight develops to the point where neither you nor the enemy are able to make the killing strike, you will have the advantage if you suddenly change your technical strategy and proceed relentlessly with your attack. This is called flooding in. To back off and try to regain your composure gives the enemy the opportunity to do likewise. It then starts all over again. When you are in a fight, you are not in a contest to see who can outlast the other in a standoff. This is why you absolutely must train incessantly to develop the proper spirit that will enable you to continue attacking even under dire circumstances. It is not a question of your technical ability, but it is certainly a matter of your desire to win with the spirit of the warrior, something you can attain only when you have acknowledged the way as the true reality for you and you alone. To chip away the edges. Sometimes you must make sacrifices in your attack in order to weaken the enemy and chip away at his defenses. If you find that it is difficult for you to penetrate strong armor, then go to the areas where the armor is weak, and you will eventually break through. There are weak spots in all armor. If you continue to chip away at the weak spots in the enemy's armor, he will eventually weaken and lose balance. The reason there are weak spots in armor is because these are the places that have to be open in order to provide flexibility in the enemy's movements. Go to these areas and slowly whittle him down. When you have the opportunity to go in for the kill, strike with absolute conviction. Do not hesitate. Destroy the enemy. Confusing the enemy. Confusing the enemy is achieved by forcing him to constantly redirect his efforts. With proper feints and thrusts, you can get the enemy thinking about where the attack will be coming from. Causing confusion in the enemy means making him unable to concentrate on his attack, permitting you to come in with a well-executed killing strike. I have spoken before about feinting and striking, misdirecting the enemy's thoughts, forcing him to think the wrong thing, and I will continue to repeat it over and over again. It is essential that you control the enemy and make slaying him a simple thing to do. You should be starting to understand what being a warrior is all about by this time. You must be fully resolved to kill the enemy by any means. You must practice constantly to understand these principles until they become second nature. The warrior attitude is very simple. Focus your mind on your goal. Constantly strive to attain perfection, and do not allow yourself to be sidetracked. Think only of winning. You must maintain your own ideals, and study properly, or you will be sure to lose the way. Three fierce shouts. There are only 3 times when you can scream fiercely in combat: before, during, and after. Shouting and screaming are the same as long as they fulfill their purpose, which is to terrify the enemy. At the beginning of a battle, you should shout to unsettle the enemy. During the battle, you should shout during each attack to maintain your own resoluteness of spirit. After you have slain the enemy, You should shout to indicate your winning resolve to honor the spirit of the thing itself. You should practice with a strong inner to outer shout at all times, as loud and as forcefully as you can. Never shout before or after a particular technique is executed, but rather at the moment you are making the strike. This helps to maintain rhythm. The shout and the strike are not two different things. They are both parts of the same thing. Think this through. It is most important to understand. When breathing, concentrate on pulling air into the lower abdominal area to develop a powerful source of energy, and never hold back on your shout for any reason. This will build up internal stress that can steal power away from you. On the other hand, do not always go around shouting, because this will make you seem to have no control over what you are trying to accomplish with your shout. Always shout when you go into an attack. Always shout when you are defending an attack prior to reversing the situation. And always shout in victory after you have finished killing the enemy. In this way, you will be able to quickly relax from the tension of battle. To move with the enemy. When you go into the attack, you are essentially telling the enemy that you don't think very highly of his spirit. This is a very powerful attitude, and must be developed carefully from much practice and technical ability. When you have this attitude, it is obvious to the enemy, and he will react with hesitation and confusion. In large group fighting, you must constantly maintain the attitude of attack, without showing any indication of retreat, regardless of the situation you are in. No matter what the enemy attempts to do, do not give him a moment's rest. Do not forget that actual combat is extremely fast and demands that you act and react without thinking. Moving with the enemy means not permitting him to regather his thoughts when in retreat. When you permit the enemy to regather himself, you are releasing your control of the situation and allowing the enemy a chance to defeat you. To crush the enemy's body and spirit. Crushing the enemy's body and spirit means you degrade and humiliate him the instant before going in for the kill. Your concentration upon destroying the enemy must be intense and single-minded. What is the sense in fighting if you do not go in for the kill immediately? Any hesitation is foolish and lends itself to boasting. This can get you killed. When you see weakness in the enemy's armor, go at it and do not stop the attack until the enemy is dead. Otherwise he may be able to recover and be able to regather his thoughts and spirit and turn the tide of battle against you. When you go for the kill, kill without mercy. Your spirit must be enormous. Think this through carefully. The moon and stars. What is meant by the moon and stars is that although both are in the sky, they are two different things. The sky is the attack, and the moon and the stars are the methods to be used. There should be no thought about using only one method or the other. You attack with a technique and it does not work. You try it again, and it still does not work. Switch. You must never rely on one particular attitude to get a job done. The enemy must be prepared for this The enemy may be prepared for this technique in a way that you may not have anticipated, so it is indeed foolish to try to continue with it. When you change your technique in the midst of battle, you are essentially becoming better able to kill because your spirit is not being forced into any one position. Reaching into the abyss. Reaching into the abyss means that you must always beat the enemy in both body and spirit. When you have merely beaten the enemy superficially, he may still be able to regain composure and regather his thoughts, thereby strengthening his spirit to beat you. At times it may be difficult for you to continue with your attack when the enemy is not yet beaten in body and spirit, but it is precisely at this time that you must reach into the abyss and bring yourself to the point where you are able to totally destroy the enemy. By reaching into the abyss of yourself, you are able to reach into the abyss of the enemy and slay him properly, and with the correct execution of purpose. If you permit the enemy to regain composure, then he will certainly attack again. To reach into the abyss of the enemy is to halt any additional attempts on the enemy's part to continue the fight. All attacks must therefore be executed with great resolve. This is accomplished only through practice and meditation on the way of the warrior. To start again. In practice, one should consider the possibility of being unable to beat the enemy with whatever means you have been using. This can and does happen. Starting again means to come to an impasse in your efforts to kill the enemy, but then immediately abandoning your approach by taking another strategy, refreshing your spirit and starting again. When you have to change your spirit while in combat, you must do so without stopping the flow of battle. In order to enable yourself to change your approach, you must constantly practice all sorts of variations on the same attack. In this way, you will be able to change in the middle of a fight. Snake's head, snake's tail. Sometimes both spirits in a fight can become entangled, and nothing seems to work. Think of strategy as being both a snake's head and a snake's tail. Never permit yourself to become entangled in the small points of combat. Expand your spirit and see both the large and the small. Do not be stricken with a single-minded attitude. This is fatal. You must be able to function flexibly within the structure of the one thing you are doing. You must understand that there is more than one path to the top of the mountain. However, you must also realize the importance of staying within the bounds of the way you are traversing. Only then can you understand the need to be aware of other attitudes. Commanders know the enemy troops. Who is it that controls the battle? Is it you, or is it the enemy? That the commander must know the enemy troops is a vital aspect of my strategy. Whether in one-man battles or large group battles, you must understand the enemy. If the commander knows the spirit of the enemy, he can easily control them and quickly beat them. To win with ease, you must maintain control over the enemy's actions. Not doing so permits the enemy to control you. If neither of you have an understanding of the way, the fight is meaningless and the outcome will be governed by luck, the winner also being the loser, regardless of the physical outcome, because of the cost of the battle. You must control the fight by possessing a greater spirit than that of your enemy. Understand this strategy and master it. Releasing both hands. What is meant by releasing both hands is that a warrior does not depend on anything but himself to beat the enemy. Do not rely on any particular weapon. Posture and attitude can often win battles. Embody the spirit of winning by having the spirit to win. It is not necessary to go into physical combat to win a fight. Sometimes you can win by your presence alone. Other times you can win simply by letting the enemy know your intentions. Think this through very carefully. It is the essence of strategy. The body and spirit of stone. When you truly understand the way, you can take any form that you want to. It is almost as if you have developed miraculous powers. You can become light as a feather, as fluid as water, or as stiff as a board. Regardless of the form you take, once you have understood my strategy, you cannot be beaten by one man or 10,000. Your attitude, no attitude, cannot be stirred except from within. Once you have understood my strategy, you will be a warrior to be reckoned with. Thoughts about my Book of Fire. This book can be considered a path to spiritual understanding for the warrior who truly wishes to understand the way of the warrior. My heart and soul have been devoted to the way of strategy ever since I was a young man. I have constantly studied ways to train my hands and eyes. Through constant practice, I have come to understand the spiritual aspects of my strategy. When I watch men from other schools and listen to them talking about their theories, I can tell that they haven't the slightest idea of what my strategy is about. They prefer to act out their techniques and think they are accomplishing things without proper practice. These men are fools. They try to impress their non-understanding upon the uninitiated. More and more men are practicing this way, and that is why the true way is becoming meaningless and will eventually be lost to all men except through my teachings. The only thing of importance in the way of strategy is the willingness and ability to truly defeat the enemy in actual combat with a longsword. If you understand what I am telling you in these pages, you will never lose to anyone. You will always win. So ends the Book of Fire.